Right, okay, let's have a think about prison. 19th century, huge development, can't emphasise that enough, huge development along with the police, two real big innovations in the 19th century in terms of crime and punishment. Two key individuals who bring about an absolute revolution in prisons, John Howard, Elizabeth Fry. Prison is not an invention of theirs. Prisons or jails had been around for ages. The Romans had prisons. However, they were not seen as a form of punishment in itself. They were merely a place generally for those who are awaiting execution or awaiting release from debt. So prison existed, but it wasn't the main form of punishment. Okay, who's John Howard? John Howard, High Sheriff of Bedfordshire, a very religious guy, had been captured by the French and experienced French prisons, came back to England, thought he would have a look around English prisons. They were just as bad, if not worse, absolutely appalled by the conditions within them. What were prisons like? What were these jails like? Every town would have a jail of one sort or another, traditionally occupied by, in the main, debtors and some people for very, very minor offences and some people waiting execution. They were not run by the state, they were privately run. Excuse me. You had to pay to be released. Men were mixed with women, women and men were mixed with children. Conditions inside these places was appalling. The sanitation was appalling. There was a disease associated with prison, jail fever. It was corrupt. It was a totally unpleasant place to be held in. John Howard was appalled by these conditions, so he writes a book, The State of Prisons, in 1777, and before that he puts pressure or he influences government to pass the 1774 Jail Act to try and improve prison. Elizabeth Fry, another deeply religious person, in this she's a Quaker, and she wants prison to reform and rehabilitate prisoners rather than punish them. She had seen what it was like inside Newgate Prison. This is the huge prison in the centre of London, infamous prison. Conditions inside were appalling. You know, again, illness, disease, violence, terrible, terrible conditions. You would not want to be locked up in there. She wants to reform the nature of prison. She doesn't want prison to be a place purely of punishment. It should be a place where the women are reformed by being educated, by being read the Bible, by doing work for which they can receive rewards. So again, she's a huge influence on the reform of prison. She publishes a book in 1825 and she influences Sir Robert Peel, who's in a position of power to do something about the nature of prisons. Fry's work initiates the great big building programme of prisons which takes place under Peel again, particularly in 1842, the building of Pentonville, which is a model prison, and the other prisons that follow Pentonville's example. So, does prison develop as both of these two reformers would have liked? No, not really. We know that they were kind of, they were very influential, but prison does not develop as they would have wished. It becomes not a place of reform and rehabilitation, but a place of retribution and deterrence. How so? Single cells, solitary confinement for the first 18 months of the sentence, pointless work like turning the crank all day for hours and hours and on, thousands of time. Being on the treadmill, constantly walking up these steps, no purpose at all to do that. Picking of the oakum, the rope, picking it to bits for hours and hours on end, pointless work. We have the separate system, the silent system, where the prisoners aren't allowed to communicate with each other, even see each other. The whole idea of reform went out of the window because people were concerned about the violence in England's cities, and so they made prison a place of hard work, hard board and hard fare. It was not to be a place of rehabilitation, it was to be a scary place that would scare the living daylights out of prisoners. Anyway, that was the idea. So, how does prison develop in the 20th century? Gradually, slowly but gradually, it loses some of the harshness that was inherent in the 19th century system. In 1907, probation is introduced. For good behaviour. If you behave well, you get time off your sentence. In 1822, the separate system is abolished. 1833, the very first open prison is introduced for those criminals who have committed a non-violent crime. And the routine or the regime inside these prisons is much more lenient than in the traditional prisons like Pentonville. 1948, sorry, hard work and corporal punishment are finally abolished. So gradually throughout the 20th century, the first half of the 20th century, conditions are getting better and better for those people incarcerated in prison. How are women treated in prison? They always make up the minority of prisoners, something like 10 to 15% of prisoners. Their crimes are traditionally those of trying to escape poverty, drug offences, mental health problems. They of course have separate prisons. They're no longer put up with men, as Elizabeth Fry saw that they wanted to have their own separate system. Children. How does prison adapt to children? In 1908, ball stalls are set up specifically for young offenders. Before that, they had been lumped in with all the adults. They had been sent to adult prisons. 1908, ball stalls set up, that changes. And later, more up to date, young offenders institutes are set up. Of course, they now have a very notorious reputation for various things. And of course, there are now very many other alternatives to prison. There are the taggings, the community service, a whole range of things that mean that prison, whilst it's still an integral part of our crime and punishment system, is no longer the be-all and end-all in terms of punishment. There are many alternatives to prison now.